University, and he's going to tell us about what they've been doing since they had a very, very difficult situation with clearing in 2018. Brian actually joined just after that happened. Isn't going to talk too much about that particular thing, but I think any of us in the room who are involved with clearing in any way, shape or form know how difficult it is when something doesn't happen as it should do around about that time. Just got one little housekeeping note. If anybody's finding difficulties with the temperature at all, let us know. We can get that adjusted. Not quite each zone in the room, but we can do something if it's too hot or too cold. So give us a shout if you're not entirely comfortable. And I'll hand over to Brian next.
Hi. I started with BCU on the first working day after a complete meltdown and a network storm which had caused systems to be not available during the clearing period. It was an extremely difficult time, but it probably informs the sort of work that we've done over the last 12 months in the speed that we've tried to execute. I wouldn't say that this was the recommended way of proceeding with moving to a hyperconverged platform, but really this was all about, we have another deadline coming in clearing 2019. We need to get something in place straight away. So I headline this around one of the benefits that came out of the business case that was created immediately after that in a replacement platform. That is, we wanted to consolidate, because it leads to some direct benefits. But there are a whole host of other benefits to hyperconverged, faster processing, and we could improve the resilience of the design, which was where we really wanted to be, but is a bit of an intangible when you're talking about the money. So what is consolidation? I think getting everything in to a smaller space. I think the takeout from that is we didn't manage to get absolutely everything into a hyperconverged platform, but that's a different story. So, consolidation. But we're also talking here about resilience. We needed to improve the resilience of the platform. We needed to be able to reassure our senior management that the events that had happened previously, we were in a much better place to withstand problems in the infrastructure. That we could innovate on the back of this. That we were trying to move to a different way of presenting computing facilities for research, education areas. That is, we would want to give them space to be able to build things that were more cloud-like and try and consume in a more cloud-like manner. That is, where they didn't need to worry about necessarily how resilient these things were going to be. Transformation. So one of the key things for the university really from an IT perspective is that we want to be able to move to the cloud, but we carry a lot of legacy systems that are simply not suitable and are expensive if we actually put them in the cloud. So we needed a space to be able to transform applications in a controlled manner. So this platform, although we've shifted the whole of legacy onto it, now gives us the space to be able to do that. The renewal part of this is that we are really looking to a legacy infrastructure that was 5 years old. We needed to renew it. Where did we go? Hyperconverged offers us a much more simple way of building using simple building blocks. Of course, depending on which technology is used. And it's flexible. That was important to us because to try and execute at speed, we needed to do the least transformation we could or had to do as part of this migration, We were, to use the analogy, we wanted to switch the plates out while everybody continued to eat the meal. We didn't want to have the problem of re-IPing all of our servers, for instance. So therefore, we needed something that was flexible enough to build a platform that looked the same as where we were before. And overall, we were looking at improving the availability of the systems. So long term, as if you looked at the old legacy platform, outages were starting to creep in, simply down to the age and the way that it had grown organically over the previous 5, 10 years. So availability was increased and was one of the key benefits of this system. Okay, so I've talked a bit about why we were doing this. Essentially, data storage in the old platform, it was full, and we were starting to have to juggle things around, and we were starting to think, well, we need budget, we need to add more storage. The thing was that that was just another organic growth step. If we re-platform, could we achieve something different with Hyperconverged? The platform was exhibiting more regular failures, and the network storm was just one of those things that had finally the straw that broke the camel's back. We were starting to be tight on computing space. Things had just grown and grown, and without adding more, again, an organic growth. So could we, through changing the platform, actually give ourselves the space we required? And I've already said, it was old. We needed to do something different. We needed to completely replace rather than try and fix the peripheries of what we were using. So what about the key challenges then of trying to do this? And I think the first thing we'd recognize within BCU is trying to find the right level of resource to undertake this project. The thing is, it had to be done at speed. We needed people who were intimately involved in the day-to-day running of the infrastructure as it stood. A lot of preparation work is required to actually build this thing, but it's also how to, a deeper understanding of where we actually were and the compromises that had been made in the infrastructure we were running on a day-to-day basis. So to do that, we took out all of the team leaders in the platform area, and we put those people onto the project team. I was thrown in ad hoc. I was not dispensable, but available, seeing as I'd only recently joined, to try and coordinate that technical effort. And then, how do you cope with platform services in the background while this was happening? That was backfilled with contract resource. So we tried to ring-fence those resources and make sure that they were not being continually dragged back into the BAU effort. As I've said, we really had a hard deadline, and to achieve this, we really needed to create an achievable scope. We had to compromise in a number of areas so that we weren't continually trying to finish things that we knew couldn't be finished. We just had to be brutal about things that we could do and were absolutely essential to the delivery of a new platform, and then work on those things that were set aside at a later date, parallel activities. So one of the examples there would be SharePoint. For maybe 2 years, the university has been talking about moving to SharePoint Online. We still have SharePoint 2010. It would be one of those natural things to be included in an infrastructure migration, but was ruled out of scope. It was just too big and complex to be able to achieve that with everything else. So as I've said, we had a stake in the ground, a hard deadline. We had to have the confidence of our management, and we had to have something in place for clearing 2019. So we could not afford to have changes in the system during this critical period. So we started to push down on the other projects that were working and talking about not delivering things into legacy as we tried to stand up and create ourselves an achievable scope for migration. And then we absolutely needed a partner with the potential to deliver what we felt were some core requirements. That is, we wanted to move away from reliance on our own data centers. We needed to look at somebody who had experience of implementing hyperconverged, because the last thing we wanted to do was try and go on a big learning curve of how does hyperconverged work, choosing a product, learning all about it. So we needed a partner for that. And we needed a partner capable of creating a service wrapper. So this is a new space for the university, really, in that if we could implement a platform with a service wrapper, it meant that for a lot of things we could simply rely upon their expertise in the support of that platform. And we could actually take on the role of fixing our own processes, so that we had 24/7 cover in that, which was something we didn't have internally, and we could leverage that to give us a much better response to failures, even though recognizing the fact that we were about to build an infrastructure with a massive level of redundancy and resilience. And we had to do that with a challenging budget. So where did we go? We looked at the marketplace, what was available. We knew that we got a deadline, so we were basically constrained to who are the biggest players, come and tell us about your product. Nutanix, HPE, NetApp, Dell EMC. So we looked at all of those, and we then invited some key ones to come in and tell us about their product, trying to gauge just how much work is involved in bending those products so that they look like our legacy. And in the background, we started to do a budget breakdown so we could actually afford what we needed to achieve. And then we came to a best fit. So it needed to support a functional solution that met our requirements without doing network enhancements or network changes, which would work across multiple physical locations and fell within our budget envelope. So from there, into discovery. And of course the problem there is this is an old set of legacy systems with a lot of interfaces that we needed to discover and work out how we were going to cope with that in the migration. And that basically came back down to using our partners as well as ourselves in working through that to get us to a useful place. So that's the discovery part. We also needed to size the target. A lot is said about the amount of deduplication that you get in hyperconverged and compression. What we actually did was said we won't rely on any of that. We have a keyline benefit here of we need some space within this platform so that we can innovate, that we can offer out. Therefore, if we simply sized it on an absolute requirement, if we got a benefit from deduplication, we would be able to use that as against that benefit strapline. We then looked at, okay, what is the absolute final shopping list of features that we need in this system? And as I said, determine how the new platform could be configured to support the least transformation. We couldn't afford to have IP address changes, and we couldn't afford to re-architecture application stacks. So part of this, going into workshops, and an early engagement with the supplier meant that we could do that detailed work as we solutioned and went forward. We didn't stop to create a paper solution, to assess alternatives. We simply kept moving forward. And we could focus on that least possible change because we were there at the creation of that detailed solution. We could challenge and collaboratively get to a solution. And finally, we started to create the contracts required to support that decision. So where did we get to? So the key platform features, we had added physical sites, taken out of the provision from our partner and in a tier 3 data center that gave us that improved resilience. We stretched clusters to match the legacy configuration of a stretched cluster. And that limited the requirements for transforming applications. Stretched VLANs, migration without IP address changes. And then we, maybe foolishly, selected a new backup tool that would give us the possibility to move backups to the cloud in one way or another. Cloud backup was seen as a strategic decision to give us a recovery solution outside of all of our new infrastructure. So what does that really look like? Our 2 data centers, as they were, we have a couple of stacks of equipment, hosts, and a stretched cluster across them. And we've moved to additional data center sites with additional equipment. We needed a witness. We needed some cloud storage. And then we stretched the clusters north-south instead of east-west, but functionally it looks the same. That gave us a clear and easy way of matching it to our requirement. The 2 pods in this instance, north and south, they form the stretched cluster are 4 HPE SimpliVity hosts with, I don't know, a bunch of processing and quite a lot of storage in them, all NVMe storage. Finally, we were carrying a lot of Microsoft clustering, which, as I guess most of you know, is a pain in the backside. We'd love to get rid of it. We couldn't transform. And the Hyperconverged solution that we'd chosen didn't actually natively support it. So we had to implement a virtual storage array just to support the Microsoft clusters. But HP stepped in and said, okay, we can do this, and provided that facility. That gave us the position we needed to be able to migrate. So once we'd installed and processed, we proceeded to migrate the virtual machines and data. We used Veeam as a backup product, and we used Veeam replication and failover as a primary technique for moving onto this platform. The VMs, 600 odd, took about 3 months to move. Given that, we couldn't move things every day during the day. A slow process, but we'd given ourselves enough time up front to be able to get over that fact and still make the clearing deadline. We still have storage to move. There was some 200 terabytes of it. We're still in the process of moving some of that into its final locations. In parallel, we specified and agreed a support service. So that was sort of a parallel strand with our partner again to stand that up. And this is complex because we're talking about services within 2 organizations that are different levels of maturity. SCC, our partner, operates ITIL out of the box. It is a standard thing that we need to match up to. The university isn't quite there with that type of maturity. So we've had to ad hoc create some processes to match and match those together. Okay, and so with this new platform, we now have the 24-hour cover that was considered to be essential to any new platform. How does this work? If we just quickly construct where we are now. If I create a machine and put it on a host, it's sitting in one of the pods of 4 hosts. We put it in scope of simplicity backup. There's an immediate replication into the other zone within that stretch cluster. That means that in the event of failure, we get an RPO of under a minute. People don't notice. And in actual fact, we did have an issue with one of the hosts. Nobody noticed, well, apart from the technical team, that it had gone down. All of the servers remained running. They were all, in fact, running against the other copy of storage in the other cluster. These being linked together with fiber at the moment. We also have HPE Rapid DR. This means there's a replication into the other cluster. In total, there's 4 copies of a given server that's under this regime. In the event of failure of both north and south, we would be able to press the button and they would stand up within 10 minutes. The data centers that we're talking about, that north-south split, is something like 3 miles. I think we'd have to have a fairly serious problem if that actually happened. Okay. So the benefits, we did in fact get a 12-to-1 deduplication out of the system. We went from 8 or more racks of equipment down to 1 in our data center. Of course, there's another 1 in our partner, but we're going from 16 down to 4. So a significant reduction in floor space and power. We've got faster and more stable processing, a given really, given it's a new platform. We've managed to improve the resilience with the layers of redundancy that we have in place now. And we have fast recovery with an off-site backup, with a backup space taken out of the cloud. With Veeam, we went with the native connectivity it has into AWS. The challenges that I reckon we have, simply selecting a platform that would match our requirement. They're not all the same. They do different things, and it is a difficult thing to choose against a moving target of what can we actually get into this platform or need to get into the platform. We need to do longer term transformation because the Microsoft clusters themselves are not natively supported, and we need to move to something like always on. And HCI isn't suitable for every load, especially highly intensively used database servers. And we've personally found it, and I've personally found it difficult to model how much it would cost us for that storage when it was a moving target of how much storage is actually going to end up in AWS. And implementing new fibers takes a hell of a long time. And in some cases, we're still waiting after 8+ months, waiting for BT to get on with it. Next steps. After all of that, we now need to do a complete refresh in our network. We have all of that legacy to start to deal with, transformation, updating, actually rebuilding. And we have processes and procedures that were fit for purpose at one point and now need to be revisited. And that's the end of this presentation. Thank you for your time. Is is the time?
I think we can manage a couple of minutes for questions for Brian. If we could just hang on if you have got questions for the microphone to get to you so that we can pick up the questions on the live stream. So has anybody got anything? Excellent.
Thank you, Brian. I'm just wondering which hypervisor you ended up using in that hyperconverged infrastructure.
It's HP SimpliVity with VMware vSphere.
Stuck with VMware. That's great. Thank you.
But it's bound together. So we weren't really going to go with something else if we went with the HP SimpliVity product. If you choose a different product, you do get a choice, don't you?
Okay. That's great. Thank you.
Anybody else? No? Well, I'm sure if you have got questions that you don't want to pose in front of the whole room, I'm sure Brian will be quite happy to take individual questions outside of that. And if you could just join me in saying thank you very much, Brian, that was really interesting.
Thank you.